Did every V-2 rocket that flew during World War II gain extra thrust from an afterburner? Could it be that this innovative concept was so far ahead of its time and so top secret that no one recognized it until a brilliant American scientist studying the V2 with powerful telescopes discovered the phenomenon and the technology behind it in 1949? His team's findings hidden away in an obscure technical report, nearly forgotten until now. We'll tell you more right after this. Hello again. Very quickly, just before we get going, I want to update you on some coming attractions on the channel. I've not been idle, well, not more than usual anyway. Coming soon, we'll be delving into the dark side of the A4V2 missile with a detailed look at the warhead or explosive payload and the electric fusing system. Right now, we're working on a series of videos taking the deepest dive ever seen into the details of the V2's guidance and control system. So if you want to understand exactly how the V2 missile found its way to a target, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to be sure you get notifications when we upload something new. And now let's get back to our video. So far, this sounds a bit far-fetched. The idea that there could still be something big to learn about the V2 rocket today, so many decades after its last flight, sounds a bit more like the silly clickbait videos about Nazi moon bases and anti-gravity flying saucers. How could such an astonishing oversight be possible? The short answer will turn out to be visibility, or at least the difficulty involved in witnessing the action visually. That and our long-established tendency to sum all forces, whether we understand their origin or not. But it's this idea of visibility and the difficulty of observing the V2's afterburner phenomenon that takes us directly to the heart of the discovery. What I'm going to show you is based on this secret report that was only declassified in July 1999. In 1949, report number 708 was finished with a print run of fewer than 30 copies. It was only distributed to specific individuals who had the necessary security clearance. Its somewhat abstruse title, Optical Studies of the Jet Flame of the V2 Missile in Flight, didn't really invite a broad readership. The investigation was led, and the final report authored, by J.B. Edson, a man who pioneered telescopic observation of high-altitude rocket performance just a few years earlier. But the report revealed the existence of a bizarre but powerful rocket afterburner, hidden in the V2's jet flame and powered, accidentally, by the turbopump. The report made its most astonishing claim, modestly enough, in the first line of the abstract on page 1. The generation of thrust by burning of fuel outside the missile is among the jet phenomena found in this study of the flying V2 rocket. Thrust by burning fuel outside of the missile. Its clipped US military English could use a few more definite articles and a bit more punctuation, but what it lacks in style, it makes up for in sheer technological wonder. I first read this report about 3 years ago, among many others from this period, and I must say, it knocked my socks off. The V2 had a rocket afterburner undiscovered until 1949. Wow. It took a bit of getting used to. The phenomenon had remained little known and unexplained due to the difficulties of observing the jet flame at high altitudes. America's declining interest in the German V2 rocket after 1952 meant that the report got little or no attention after this period and fell into obscurity. Until now. As the title makes clear, the report is a deep and multi-layered study of the V2's jet flame to a level that had never been attempted before, utilizing telescopes equipped with film cameras and spectrographic recording equipment. Let's look at how this works. The Germans had been observing details of the V2 in flight from the start. They had observed many details of the jet flame, but nearly always using low-powered flak and rangefinder binoculars, having typical magnifications of only 10 and 12 times. They also used a Scania cine theodolites, like the one shown here, But again, the magnification and detail recorded was limited. As good as the Ascania Cine theodolites were, once the V2's engine shut down about 25 miles from launch, the jet flame and, after a few seconds, even the glow from the white-hot graphite vanes were no longer visible. The missile became too faint to track, and the film resolution of the Cine theodolites, like most binoculars used, was too low to show more than basic details beyond about 5 miles. These optical tools simply couldn't provide much detail after the first 10 to 15 seconds of flight. For example, they missed the disappearance of shock diamonds in the jet flame as the missile went supersonic, an easy-to-observe detail later discovered in America using telescopes at the White Sands Missile Range. Thanks to friends at the Peenemünde Historical Technical Museum, I learned from Dr. Thomas Langer's 2006 doctoral thesis that Peenemünde did, in fact, start several projects to observe the entire missile trajectory in high resolution, using powerful telescopes, often adapted from astronomy use. One example is the Comet Catcher refractor, commandeered from Belgrade Observatory after the 1941 invasion of Yugoslavia. Fitted with a cine camera and a motorized tracking mount, its sophisticated photoelectric tracking system was repurposed for missile tracking. Similarly, after invading neutral Belgium, the Germans took a Zeiss 12-inch Newtonian reflector from Uccle Observatory, modifying it for high-altitude missile observation. However, these instruments proved difficult to handle and didn't yield useful recorded results, at least none that have been found so far. It's possible the Germans also commissioned unique instruments for this project. I have long been interested in large observation binoculars, and the instrument shown here, one of 4 huge Carl Zeiss binocular telescopes, especially stands out. These instruments, found abandoned at the Wesermunde Air Base after the war, had 8-inch or 200mm lenses, magnifications of 20 and 40 times, and sophisticated fixed-head prism systems allowing easy high-altitude observation. For decades, these binoculars were thought to have been made to help direct anti-aircraft fire against Allied bombers, a view I was somewhat sceptical about from the start. But in 2002, a new view emerged, that they were actually intended for observing rocket trajectories at Peenemünde. This idea came from a letter reproduced in Dr. Hans Seeger's book from a Dr. Stodmeister, who believed the binoculars were for rocket observation, though he provided no concrete evidence. I found this opinion intriguing, especially given my skepticism about the anti-aircraft explanation. Why build just 4 of these elaborate instruments so late in the war? In a previous version of this video, I had incorrectly stated that the rocket group had failed to recognize the importance of telescopic observation, but Dr. Langer's research has corrected that view. Anecdotally, some technicians who later worked on the American V2 project mentioned that advanced observing methods were being developed at Peenemünde, but the war ended before any significant results could be achieved. This view seems to be confirmed by Dr. Langer's research, as he included no references to photographic material or reports that indicated that telescopic observation in Peenemünde had achieved any kind of success. Too late, the Germans had realized the importance of developing a program to observe every second of the engine burn and the entire trajectory of the V2 with high-resolution instruments. Well, in the late 1940s, the American military at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds, led by J.B. Edson, did precisely that. They observed all aspects of the V2's jet flame at all phases of the engine burn, using a range of powerful telescopes. They used specially designed telescopes to record the details of the jet flame and spectrographic measuring instruments to analyze the changing chemistry and temperature of the jet flame at stages in the trajectory. The telescope shown here was used to record spectrographic details of the flame at a height of just 50 feet. To study the details of the jet flame at greater altitudes, powerful telescopes were needed. The 10-inch or 25-centimeter mirror-based Newtonian telescope shown here is fitted with a 35mm film camera, and to track the missile, the instrument is mounted on an electrically driven M45 machine gun mount. The mounted pair of 4.5-inch refractors shown here was known affectionately to the operators as Little Bright Eyes. The M45 gun mount in its more usual military configuration is shown here. This modified M45 and telescope rig was used regularly at the USAF Lookout Mountain Laboratory in the 1950s and 60s. The American tracking instruments could observe the rocket for 120 miles, and the telescopes allowed high levels of detail to be observed. The German observations only covered the first 50 miles, and even then the rocket was little more than a dot near the end of their instrument's range. To say close-up telescopic observation was fruitful for the Americans was an understatement. They quickly accumulated a lot of data, but much of it was confusing and difficult to understand. At first, telescopic observations of the missile at high altitude showed an unexpected detail and structure in the jet flame that varied from round to round and with the attitude of the missile. Now, taken as a group, these accumulated reports were rather confusing. They seemed to be a surprising lack of consistency in the observable structure of the jet frame from one round to the next. And yet, there was a strong consistency in the measured performance of the missile. Now, some people held the opinion that some uncertainty should be expected from 3 or 4 year old missiles that were originally designed to be manufactured and launched all within the space of 3 weeks. But more than anything else, the observed variations in the flame were a puzzle. Then one particular round provided the clue that would in time provide the explanation for what they were seeing. At 12:54 in the afternoon of the 19th of April 1948 at the White Sands Proving Ground, a V-2 missile designated Round 38 was launched into a clear blue sky. The normal view camera tracks the flight, but the view becomes less detailed with every second the missile recedes from the camera. About 30 seconds into the burn, the missile lost roll stabilization and began to roll longitudinally at a rate of about 1 rotation every 2 seconds. But the telescope trackers were zeroed in on the V-2's jet flame, and the rotation revealed an odd bilateral thickening in the jet flame, and even more puzzling, 2 bright lobes that were creating this effect. By intuition, we would assume that the jet flame, expanding and flowing from a round engine orifice, would have a round profile, more or less. But at an altitude of about 4.5 to 5 miles, or 7 to 8 kilometers, some 35 seconds into the burn, when the V-2 is moving at about 1.5 times the speed of sound, the A4's jet flame was seen to have a pronounced axial bilateral asymmetry. That's to say, it was oval in profile and not round as expected. Tracking telescope camera T1 took the footage that these still images were taken from. The film was recorded at 16 frames per second, and we have 24 frames here, so only 1.5 seconds of film. I've put the frames back together as an animation so we can see the 2-second roll and the 2 bright lobes. The main central jet exhaust flame isn't bright enough or hot enough to show in these high contrast images. Only the 2 brighter lobes or wings can be seen. So at high altitude, when the missile has been airborne for about 35 seconds and is moving at about 1.5 times the speed of sound, the shape of the jet flame changes and develops this oval profile. Close studies of previous tracking telescope film revealed that the 2 broad, bright wings of the jet that creates this oval shape consistently appear under the 2 turbine steam exhausts. We can see very clearly on the model how the oval shape of the jet flame, the long axis of that oval, is clearly aligned with the steam outlet vent on both sides of the missile, the one between fins 1 and 2, and diametrically opposite the vent associated with fins 3 and 4. The question now is, how does 250 pounds or 113 kilos of turbine exhaust gases emitted at subsonic velocity affect 9 tons of jet gases emitted at a velocity of up to 6 times the speed of sound? How does so little create an effect in so much? Now, the answer to the riddle of these observed changes in the jet flame as it moved from round profile to oval profile are explained in a rather simple way, easy to say anyway: combustion. But combustion extra and entirely external to the events going on in the combustion chamber. In fact, external to the superstructure of the missile in its entirety, and actually combustion going on in the jet flame, associated with this broadening and thickening of the jet flame that makes is the key to these observations as the jet flame changes from a round profile to a oval profile. Now, for combustion, we need three things: a ready source of heat, a source of fuel, and a source of oxygen. We have the heat from the rocket engine exhaust gas at 1450 centigrade, but we need two other things for combustion: fuel and oxygen. The free oxygen is supplied directly from the turbine exhaust flow as a result of the chemical reaction in the steam generation system. I'm going to try not to let any drips go in, and away we go. There you go. Pretty energetic. When the steam generator system is discussed in the literature, the emphasis is always on the superheated steam output generated from the chemical reaction between H2O2 and a range of so-called catalyst permanganate reactants. But for every 2 pounds or kilogram of steam produced, there's 1.5 pounds or a kilo of oxygen liberated at the same time. This means about 2 pounds or a kilo of free oxygen is being pushed out of these vents every second. Okay, that accounts for the oxygen, but what about the fuel? Surely there's no unburnt fuel left in the jet flame. That was all burned up in the combustion chamber, right? Well, no. There are a number of reasons why the jet flame of a rocket may contain unburnt or only partly burnt fuel. But in the case of the V2, there was a very specific reason why the outer layers of the jet flame were rich in unburnt or incompletely burnt fuel. And this was because of the way the fuel was used in the Vale cooling system. Now, we covered the film cooling technique used in a previous video, and if you want more detail, you can look at that by following the link in the top right. But in broad terms, it was found that the regenerative fuel cooling system, where the entire chamber was cooled by fuel on its way to the injector head via the hollow double wall of the thrust chamber, that this was insufficient cooling to safeguard the most at-risk areas of the combustion space, the area around the throat, for example. So 7.5 litres or 2 US gallons per second of fuel, and if you're wondering what that looks like, it's this much fuel per second, was used to wet or irrigate the internal surface of the combustion chamber, allowing this fuel to burn with only the low levels of oxygen that made it as far as the thrust chamber wall. As a result, there was a constant stream of incompletely burnt, or more accurately, incompletely oxidized fuel passing from the rim of the nozzle and on to the outer layers of the jet surface. That's to say, the jet flame carries this incompletely burnt fuel out of the chamber, effective 360 degrees around the rim, but it's only the poorly oxidized fuel adjacent to the turbine exhaust vents and their stream of chemically produced free oxygen that it has its moment with destiny and explodes into life as rocket combustion. I think so far the explanation as regards the source of combustion in the jet flame is straightforward enough. But we haven't yet explained how this combustion is anything more useful than a candle on a birthday cake. How can it function as an afterburner and add to the engine's thrust when it occurs not only outside of the combustion chamber, but even outside of the missile, several feet away from it in the jet flame? Now, this is where it gets tricky. And we need the extra steps to explain how the expanding gases of these combustion events occurring in the jet flame, instead of dissipating uselessly, increase the missile's velocity. This critical extra part of the afterburner is the invisible high velocity flow passing the rocket as it pushes through the atmosphere. As the missile accelerates faster and faster from subsonic through supersonic and on finally to hypersonic speeds, the flow of the atmosphere, although increasingly rarefied at altitude, creates a bottling or encapsulation effect around the missile and the jet flame. I'm going to represent the encapsulation effect with this thin plastic sheet tube. It feels like I'm a florist trying to wrap a single rose here. But this tube now represents the collision between the high-speed flow passing the missile and the turbulent boundary layer of the jet flame, creating a distinct pressure zone out of the space in between. So we've got to try to imagine, that's the idea behind this model, is to try to create this idea that there is something you can't see around the jet flame, which is this encapsulation caused by the supersonic and later hypersonic flow past the missile and around the jet flame. So now these hot gases created by these two zones or lobes of combustion occurring in the jet flame expand into this restricted pressure space created by the encapsulation effect, and as a result squeeze on the jet flame, creating an increase in pressure that passes back along the flame into the combustion chamber. These two zones, or lobes of combustion, as I've been calling them, that form underneath the turbine exhaust vents, are sufficiently intense that, according to the report, they're observed to connect through the jet flame, passing from one side of the flame to the other. Dr. Edson pointed out that at some angles, the bright bar or bridge of combustion was one of the most easily spotted features of the jet flame at higher altitudes. Now, I think it's a bit of a stretch going from the idea of the free oxygen that's passing out of the turbine exhaust vents at the tail of the missile and the simple idea of this fuel-rich layer on the outside of the jet flame to then accept that combustion events going on in the jet flame is capable of influencing what's going on deep in the combustion chamber of the V2. Why wouldn't the increased pressure caused by the burning simply radiate away from the flame? Now, remember, it's crucially important that we understand that this event goes on when we've got this encapsulation event going on. But what I'm going to try to do is give you more of an idea of how this could go on with a very simple demonstration. I'm going to use this converted wine cooler, it actually is, and a few rubber party balloons. Now, I'm going to use this wine cooler, which is my combustion chamber, and I've marked on it here the exhaust vents, the turbine steam exhaust vents on the tail of the missile. So picture that this is the rim of the nozzle and that the fins would be on here in the way that you'd expect to see on the missile, and that this is the combustion chamber beavering away inside the missile, producing the jet flame. Now, my jet flame is going to be a balloon, which I'm going to blow up inside here. It's pretty hard to blow it up because I'm blowing it up inside something, but I need a bit more jet flame sticking out, so I'm going to put a bit more air in it yet. Okay, that's about it. So I'm going to knock that off. Or not, as the case may be. Talk amongst yourselves just for a moment. Okay, got it. So, there we go. Not a great model maybe, but there's my flame sticking out of the nozzle, and there's the combustion part of the jet flame that's occurring inside the combustion chamber. Now I'm going to fit another balloon as an indicator on this little pipe at the top here. So this pipe connects directly into the combustion chamber, and you can see at the moment it's all deflated and down. Now let's mark on the balloon the areas of the additional combustion immediately underneath the turbine exhaust vents. The steam is coming out of these vents, remember, and mixed in with that steam is the free oxygen. So the combustion events are occurring here and dissipating down through the flame, here, and dissipating down through the flame. And we can actually see that there's a decent gap between where this is going on and the superstructure of the missile. But as I squeeze, I'm going to hold it by the jet flame. In fact, I'm going to hold it just there. Watch what happens to the balloon as let me just put that out so you can see it. As I increase the pressure in the jet flame, the pressure in the combustion chamber at the top here is increased, and that balloon inflates. I'm hoping you can see that very easily. Now, obviously, for this to work, this is a poor analog, because obviously the jet flame coming out of a V2 doesn't look anything like this party balloon. But the idea here is it captures some of the idea of the encapsulation effect that we get round the jet flame as the missile is moving at great velocity through the atmosphere. So we've got to try to picture this being held down, and the pressure that's occurring on the jet flame as a result of these combustion events not being able to expand away from the jet flame, but being forced actually to squeeze on the jet flame and thereby increase the pressure in the combustion chamber, thereby increasing the velocity of the gases that are coming out of the nozzle, and therefore increasing the velocity of the missile. Now, it's important to understand that for this to work, a number of things have got to be in play. We've already established the source of free oxygen coming from the turbine exhaust vents in the tail of the missile, and the fact that the jet flame has a layer on the outside that is fuel rich, and this fuel is coming from the film cooling technology used in the V2 engine. So we've got those two things. We've got our fuel and we've got our supply of oxygen for the combustion, and we've got the heat in the tail ready to make that happen. But the afterburner effect doesn't really occur until the missile has achieved some altitude and, more importantly, some velocity, significant velocity. So this starts to occur around about 35 seconds into the burn, when the missile has achieved a height of around about 4.5 to 5 miles, that's 7 to 8 kilometers, and most importantly, when the missile has achieved a velocity of about 1.5 times the speed of sound, about Mach 1.5. From there on in, the missile gets faster and faster until it achieves hypersonic velocities, and it occurs throughout that period. So from around about 35 seconds, 40 seconds into the burn until the end of the burn at around about 65 seconds typically, this afterburner effect is occurring. So for the last 25 to 30 seconds of the engine burn, every successful V2 shot had additional thrust provided by the accidental jet flame afterburner, even though nobody knew it was there. Strange or what? The report didn't provide a means of calculating the exact amount of thrust coming from the afterburner effect, but the thrust delivered was significant. And if you somehow deleted the effect completely, the maximum range of the missile would have been reduced by several miles. We'll let the last word go to James B. Edson, the man in charge of the investigation and the author of this report. This accidental creation of thrust by such a novel mechanism invites the question whether the effect can be enhanced by deliberate design.